everybody. It's Bunny Pounds here with another conversation of Christians Engaged. We've got another edition of our podcast where we talk about our story in political activism. I have the most incredible board of directors for this ministry statewide that you've ever seen, okay? I love these people. They have been in the trenches, most of them for years and years, as believers, as Christian ministries in politics, and have made a huge difference and have showed other people how to walk with integrity and character in the political space. So I not only get to have Eugene Ralph Sr., who's on my board with us today, but I get Eugene Jr. How are you guys?
Doing great.
Just great. Having a blast.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Father and son duo today. Eugene Jr., how old are you exactly?
I'm 20, turning 21 this year.
20 years old, and you're going to hear from this young man just the wisdom that pours out of his mouth. Okay. We're all laughing because now there's a whole bit of expectation. Okay, so you guys have been amazing. Eugene pastors a church, Everlasting Redeeming Bible Fellowship down in South Dallas. Just a man of the word, a man of integrity, has been involved. You guys came from Louisiana after Katrina into the great state of Texas, but you've been involved politically and in political activism and helping candidates for years and years and years. Eugene was just featured on an amazing movie called Uncle Tom about African-American or Black conservatives around America, featured with Larry Elder, so many great people on this movie. And the website is uncletom.com. And then Eugene Jr. is a sophomore in college, and this kid, I shouldn't call you a kid. Sorry, Eugene. Can articulate the conservative message and his faith in politics so much better than any young person I've ever heard. So let's get going with you, Eugene Sr. Tell us about your family's early life and how you guys got to Texas and how you became a conservative, but also became a political activist.
Okay. I grew up in a home with Christian parents. Literally went to church all my life, and basically was taught just the basic things people teach the kids about, common decency, right and wrong, the Lord, those type things. When I became an adult, some things that I was seeing just didn't add up. I was a Democrat. I did not like paying high taxes. I struggled with that every time I cast a vote. And when I got around 30 years old or so, I began to realize that many of the things that I was upset about was being done by the people I was voting for. So that I went on a bit of a tirade for a number of years. So I was letting everybody I understand that the people we were voting for were not working in our best interest. And there was a little bit of a conflict there, but really what did it for me was in 1997, living in New Orleans, we had a mayor who passed an executive order that gave domestic partnership benefits to homosexuals who at the time were employed by the city. And, I got involved in activism because the local pastor decided to have a protest rally outside of City Hall. And me and my wife and my 4 kids at the time, all homeschooled, joined in that protest rally. And I would say that was my first foray into political activism. And also he invited me to be on his talk show later that day. So I kind of got my feet wet with that, and I kind of got the bug, and everything else is kind of history. Several years later, I did get involved in the campaign for Bobby Jindal for governor. That was my first foray into political campaigning. And then, shortly after that, we moved here. Now, for several years after that, we didn't do much because we didn't even know if we were going to stay in Dallas, honestly. We were trying to figure out just what was going to happen. And then around 2010 or 2011 or so is when I really got involved in local politics here in Dallas, and had to learn the lay of the land, learn things all over again. Things are different here from Louisiana in a lot of ways. But there are some commonalities that we see run through almost every political campaign or aspect of politics. And so basically got involved with this organization called Game Changers. And we started trying to reach the Black community specifically with the conservative message from a biblical constitutional perspective. And in doing that, had an opportunity to reach some other minority groups because that message transcends demographic. That message, what I found is that, and some of this I already knew, but it was confirmed that the message is something that is needed across all boundaries. So I've been expanding the messaging to anyone who's willing to listen, and working with people like you and other people I've met along the way. It's a lot of great people. If you call it a journey, it's a tremendous journey. And I consider what we do with politics is a form of evangelism, because the process for how we go about winning hearts and minds is very much the same. We make the case based on the issues, based on what the truth is, based on reality, sharing those things with people, helping them understand and helping them come to grips with realities that they're going to have to deal with at some point or another. And sometimes we have to be a little bit more provocative in how we go about it in order to make sure we get the point across. But it's often very enlightening and very, it's a lot of fun when we watch the responses as people, we can see in their faces when they start to get it. And that's always a lot of fun.
Well, you bring up a great point. Many people think that they have to either do evangelism, preach the gospel exclusively, or they have to get in politics. And what we do, right, and what we are encouraging everybody to do is to mix all of that in your life. We can have conversations with people out on the street about worldview or about Jesus or about an issue in our town and still make a huge contribution, right, to their life and the changing of their minds, and still keep Jesus in the mix, right? That's so important. And Eugene Jr., you kind of grew up in this crazy family. We're gonna interview your mom Lily in a little while as well. But how is their journey? We'll call it a journey. Walking in politics, walking in sharing their faith boldly in their community, changed your life. And when did you start actively sharing yourself personally?
Yeah, well, I suppose the interesting thing, kind of growing up so steeped in really heavy word, of course, above all else, it was about God's word coming
right.
up. But of course, they were politically active. And I remember from the earliest times, whenever Fox News or Fox Business was on, I was probably 6 years old and trying to decipher exactly what it meant that the Dow Jones average was whatever it was that day, right? Probably my earliest political memory was reading a comic strip in the Sunday paper and asking somebody what it meant when they were making a joke about tarp pits. But as far as when I became comfortable doing these things, for me, it was never much of a choice to become comfortable with it.
And let me go back to tarp pits, because that was the Troubled Asset Protection Program. During 2007, 2008, that many fiscal conservatives were fighting against. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fine. It's always great to get off a conversation about economics. I would love that. But no, I would say from my earliest time, really getting involved, spreading the message myself was probably at least 6th or 7th grade. And it was never really anything that I actively set out to do. It was just people around me who, I guess, in my class, I read a lot. They noticed that I guess I was well-spoken, and they asked me a lot of questions about a lot of things. And the wonderful thing about that is not just that you're able to have the opportunity to affect somebody else's understanding, but it really challenges yourself to really go out and study even more and study deeper, to be able to answer those questions. And also because it reveals, some things that you yourself don't totally understand. But I would say it definitely started in earnest about my junior year of high school. And it was all due to an English class that I had. Can't remember the teacher's name, but if I ever did, I'd like to thank him. Where we read two books, both of whom by the famous author C.S. Lewis. It was Mere Christianity and the Screwtape Letters. And the two of those pretty much back to back were what started my journey to say in high school, well, what is it that I do believe and why? And really to figure out the nuances and all of the edge cases as to the things that I had grown up with, making sure that they did make sense. And I can't say that I came out at the end of that having some sort of radical paradigm shift. Many of the things that I had learned as a child were confirmed to be true, but in a much deeper and more meaningful way. So I would say that would probably be about where that started. It was in junior in high school reading C.S. Lewis. So everybody go pick those up if you're interested.
Well, exactly. We need to get our young people reading good Christian literature. And that's the best, right? So that began everything. And, digging deep into your beliefs and digging deep then into political philosophy kind of has brought you to where you are today at a very young 20. So back to that, Eugene Sr., campaigning for candidates. You started out again with Bobby Jindal running for governor in Louisiana, but you have been involved here with our state senator, Bob Hall. You've been involved with multiple state rep candidates. You were very helpful to me when I ran for Congress. Why is it important for you and your family to get involved in campaigns? And I know Eugene Jr. was out there registering voters as part of an initiative this last election cycle. Why is that important? Why should anybody consider getting involved in campaigns as part of their lifestyle?
Well, I would say because as an American citizen, we have a unique privilege that we have that actually falls under the guise of responsibility, if you look at it correctly, that we should take part in what's taking place in our political arena. Our system is designed for people to be actively involved. And what happens is when that does not happen, then things go awry, as we've seen. And so our system is also designed, if you look carefully at the history of our country, that the founders had in mind that the Christians would be the ones pushing the influence, because our Judeo-Christian foundation of the way we were built as a nation is only going to be preserved if Christians who are committed to the Lord continue to advocate for those principles to remain in place. And keeping in mind that as we approach these things, that the devil is always busy and he's always trying to subvert what the Lord is doing and has done. And if we know these things, we approach it that way, it takes a lot of foolishness out of what we're doing. It removes from the conversation or the thought process a lot of the things that just don't make any kind of real sense when you actually think about it. So, I tell people, especially Christians, that as far as what we do this because this is a responsibility, not an option. We have responsibility to ourselves. We have responsibility to the Lord Jesus Christ, and the fact that He blessed us to be in this nation at this time to do what we're doing. Because the bottom line is this: several years ago, Dinesh D'Souza made a video, a movie called "What Happened," something to the effect of what would happen if America didn't exist, what kind of impact that would have had on the world. And I think that everybody should take a look at that because it's an eye-opening concept.
So good. Great points. Because if Christians create a vacuum, who's going to fill it? It's going to be the wicked, right? Or people that don't share our moral compass and values. And that's what we've seen really over the last 50, 60 years is the Christian church has abandoned the front lines of the political movement. And we have felt the sting of that in our local communities, in our schools, in our cities, and around our state and nation. So Eugene Jr., you got involved in a lot of different political activities. Talk to me a little bit about how people respond. You know, you're out there talking to potential voters, or you're trying to register people to vote, and you're talking about the sanctity of life. You're talking about fiscal conservatism or fiscal policy as it relates to, you know, conservative worldview, that government shouldn't be the end all, that we should take individual responsibilities and take care of our families and our communities. How do people react to a young, articulate Black man talking with this lingo? I mean, I'm just curious. How do they react to you?
Well, I mean, definitely a lot of my favorite political memories have been block walking for candidates in the local area. You get to knock on people's doors, have a lot of very interesting conversations, and it does seem that having, you know, a young guy come to their door who, you know, based on the appearances and obvious correlations that you see with voting, they're a little bit disarmed when they hear the kind of rhetoric that I'm giving them. But I think the most interesting reactions, whenever it, you know, comes to the things that my own personal views on the politics and all these things, like a lot of times, it happens outside of what is the explicitly political sphere. And a lot of people who know me will have heard this heard this story. But, you know, it starts when I had orientation for university, and I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I had posed a question that was a little bit against the grain for this room of what was probably a couple of hundred students. And they weren't prepared, you know, quite to hear that. And the response that I got was not quite satisfactory. However, afterward, when we were mingling with a lot of the students who were involved in this display, they recognized my name and they say, "Oh, you were the guy that asked the question." And that was a spark for at least a couple of very interesting friendships, none of whom agree with me on any core issues. But, you know, it opened the door to a lot of very interesting conversations. It's the kind of things that I constantly have with other college students, especially about my age. And that sort of thing does seem to disarm them a little bit.
Well, those of you watching us on video can see Eugene, the father, just brimming with pride over listening to these stories. But hopefully you guys feel the love on audio as well. So, okay, Eugene, we know, you know, God, I hate the word or the phrase that God's colorblind, or that we should be colorblind, because God is not colorblind. He's all about the nations. He's about every tribe and tongue. He's about, I hate the word diversity because the left has taken it over, but you know, he's all about our differences and the celebrating that in our communities, right? So, you know, you all have unique voices, and you have unique voices in your community. How has God used you to speak into people's hearts and lives where I would never be able to say the things that you can say?
Okay. I'll start off by saying that don't sell yourself short. You can say exactly what I say. I'm serious.
Right. I received the rebuke.
Exactly what I say. You'll be amazed what you can get away with if you know how to say what you want to say. Often I say what I say, depending on who I'm talking to and what it is. I'll say it with a smile, and that's in part to lower the temperature a little bit, because going in it, I already realized that this is not going to be received very well. But as we get into it, my entire purpose for what I'm doing is to win the heart. If I can get to the heart of the matter with the individual or the group of individuals, I have something to work with. And so basically, if I can win them on some common ground, some things we agree on, what we find is that most of the time we agree on what the problems are. We just don't agree on what the solutions are. And many times the reason why people disagree with us on the solutions is because they don't understand what it is we're trying to help them understand. They don't understand our perspective. So it's extremely important for us who have the truth to be willing to push it to those places. We'll find that when we actually push it, that we're going to get to that point where the person is going to say, okay, I get that. Now, they may still disagree with you, but it won't be because they don't understand you. It's because they're not ready to admit to themselves that whatever they've been believing up to this point is not the truth. I'll give you a perfect example. Most of us, we get our belief system initially from our parents. And, for some of us, as we grow older, our parents pass away. And we find out that something our parents taught us was incorrect. Now, a lot of that was done in ignorance, but the bottom line, incorrect is incorrect. And, and the truth of the matter is people don't want to admit that their parents were wrong about certain things, at least, most people. And when it's a critical issue, I found that is the toughest part, that people have to admit to themselves before they can acknowledge that what I'm telling them is correct. They have to admit to themselves that my parents and those who came before them were also incorrect. They don't want to deal with that. So recognizing that, sometimes we just have to throw it out there. I'll just say, chances are your parents probably taught you thus and such, and this is the reason why you believe that. And then once they say, yeah, that's true. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll say something like, well, it's possible that I'm quite sure it's true that there's some other things your parents taught you that you disagree with that you don't even consider doing today, right? And they say, yeah. And I'll get them to name one or two and say, so if they were wrong on those things, how could they not also be wrong on these things? And now you're making the connection. See, the thing is, some of it's a little bit of psychology, some of it's just savvy, some of it's just putting some ideas to it. I tell people all the time, doing what we do requires mental energy. It requires that we commit ourselves mentally to when we're in our downtime, when you're driving your car and you're in your car by yourself, turn off the radio and just think. Sometimes you can think with the radio. When you're laying in the bed or whatever you're doing, but your mind is wandering, use that time to come up with ideas for something that happened with an exchange with someone of how, if this happens again, how am I going to handle it? How am I going to handle it better so I can actually be successful next time? Try it. Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, it's like, if we do that, trust me, you will have, not only will you be successful, you'll have so much fun doing it. See, the thing is, when we engage people, we have fun when we are successful in accomplishing our goal with getting our point across, right? So the key is like, if I don't get my point across this time, I'm coming back. Look, you're not finished with me, okay? Next time I see you, I'm coming back and we're going to have this exchange to some degree. And you try to keep the exchange civil, and like I said, some people, they get a little bit hostile with you and you do what you can to lower the temperature. Because the bottom line is this, first of all, you have to look at it from, I'm not going to win everybody. And I'm not going to win everybody today. So if I don't win them today, I'll come back tomorrow or the next time. If you have that approach, it'll also help keep your sanity.
So always learn from every exchange, always dig deep and spend deep thought time, digging into the word, into thoughts that will help you get better, right? And I think Eugene Jr. will say he will definitely admit that you are not perfect. There are some things that you got wrong. Maybe not to your face. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll just put that out there that I'm not perfect. That way, there's no unrealistic expectations that anyone should have. So if I screw up somewhere, just remember I told you from the beginning I'm not perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, young Eugene, so what do you tell people, especially young people or other friends that really want a desire to be bolder and to be able to articulate what they believe? How do you get from belief to being able to share things and be able to articulate it right so that people really feel your heart and are not turned off by that exchange? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, of course, the emphasis is always on practice. You get better as you do these things with time. But I definitely have to agree with some of the things that my dad said. And it's pretty interesting hearing him say this because we have some of the same strategies for these things and we've definitely developed them independently because I don't think we've ever talked about that before. But good humor and a disarming smile makes just about every conversation a lot easier. So if you're able to do that,
It's a sales tactic.
it is.
I think I've laughed more on this podcast than any podcast previously. Maybe it's the three of us. We're just not good for each other.
That's why I adapted the title, The Happy Warrior. I am a warrior for Christ. I go out here and I go and get in battles of warfare, but I insist on maintaining a happy, way of going about it, because it helps you maintain your sanity.
And remember, our battles, again, not against flesh and blood, right?
Right.
So all the people we're having these conversations with, they're not our enemies. They're just people that we want to have a good conversation with and help them draw closer to the truth of so many matters. And when you come at it from that sort of perspective, it makes things a lot easier. But when it comes to boldness, I mean, you just have to have the courage of your convictions. And when you know what you're saying is true, you don't have to worry about whether or not people disagree with you, because people will disagree with you even if what you believed was wrong. So why do I have a problem with this?
Well, what you guys show is that your identity is founded in Christ, right? So it doesn't matter what anybody says against you, because you're firmly convinced on the Word of God and who you are in Him. That,
Right.
I mean, who cares what anybody else says?
That's right. And it's not to say that when you receive harsh criticism, it doesn't initially sting, but it only lasts momentarily. And I take the position that once again, as a Christian, we have a responsibility and not an option to stand firm on our faith. And so when keeping in mind that whenever something comes against you and it's coming against what your belief system tells you is true, if you're rooted and grounded in what you believe, it will cause you, rather than to shrink, it will cause you to stand firm, to advance, to be more bold, because you realize that spirit needs to be pushed back. And I spent much time encouraging Christians to stop making excuses for being a Christian. Look, Christians are imperfect. There's a saying that says we're not perfect, we're saved or something like that. We're forgiven. We're not perfect, we're forgiven. Christians are forgiven for our error. We're not perfect. And any honest Christian, which hopefully they all are, will tell you they're not. That's the reason why I tell people, look, if you're looking to me to be the perfect person, you're looking at the wrong person. Hopefully I will be someone who will encourage you and maybe inspire you. But if you're looking for perfection, you're looking in the wrong direction. You need to be looking at the Christ that's in me, not me. So that's how it rolls. And so, with that understanding, going out, doing what I do, and always keeping in mind that what I'm doing is always in mind that I want to glorify the Lord in what I do. It makes it so much easier to do these things. And there's a level of frustration that exists within me, that those who are Christians, who name the name of Christ, who often are walking around in fear, which is not of God, and giving me all these excuses for why they're not doing what they should be doing, that causes me to be in more of a scolding mode towards some of those individuals, not to the point where I'm beating them down, but scolding them as a point like chastising. Look, get with the program. Look, we got too much serious work to do out here. You need to be worried about what somebody thinks about you, okay?
Yes.
Because the bottom line is, these people here who think these ill things about you, many times they were informed incorrectly to begin with. That's the majority. The rest of them, they insist on doing the wrong thing. You can't do anything with that. All you can do is pray for them and just keep on going and do what you got to do.
And to the best of my knowledge, I'm not at risk of being crucified for giving any of these things. So I think we're in pretty good hands right now.
No, I talk to Christians all the time because they're like, what does it feel like to have $1 million spent against you when you run for office? Well, it's not fun. I mean, it's not fun. But you can't compare it to what the Coptic Christians in Egypt have experienced, or Muslims leaving their faith and running to Jesus and their families disowning them. American Christians we got to grow up. We have it so easy, and we're so afraid of someone just saying, I just don't really receive what you say. And that offends us. Okay, we've got a lot more problems than we think, right? And I'll go back to this. I think everybody has experienced either a family member or a close friend not politically agreeing with them, maybe not voting for the same candidate for president. We all have people in our life that we have to talk to that we don't politically agree with. It doesn't mean we don't love them, but we also can use the Bible and our biblical values to speak the truth in love, right?
Exactly. And, I would say most of the work I've done politically throughout the years, especially within the Black community, has been targeting those who are Christians and using the word to make my case. And hopefully with that the Spirit of God is going to convict their hearts to cause them to make some changes, because the decisions they're making are more detrimental to our community than they are to some of the other communities. And I mean, it has an overall negative effect to the entire society, but we are leading the charge in the wrong direction. And that's actually, considering our history and the fact that things we went through in the civil rights movement, in order for us to be treated fairly, to have a place at the table, to be considered to be just like everybody else, to just abandon all of that effort for foolishness is absurd. And that probably is one of the things that truly angers me more than anything else. And if you want to see somebody get up on their soapbox, let me catch somebody doing that.
And I know you can get up on your soapbox, Eugene. I've seen it before. So, okay, let's end this podcast with just a couple thoughts, final thoughts on how people can educate themselves, because I know there's some people listening right now and going, ooh, I don't know if I can do what they do. That sounds really difficult. But really, it's just about knowing the Bible and knowing enough about the issues, national issues and state issues, to be able to articulate it to somebody else. Eugene Jr., how do you educate yourself? I mean, I know it's not the public school system that's doing it. So how are you educating yourself to be able to communicate to other people? How do you push yourself?
Yeah, so it's really, really great that God has blessed us with such amazingly powerful minds, because all we need is the Bible and our brain. If we can dream up the questions, we can kind of go through and ask ourselves the questions that would be, the things that we would expect that people would retort, when it comes to taxes or abortion or any of these things. That's how I started. I started out just asking myself questions and running myself through the ring. But when that seems to reach the end of its course, you can go out and, there's one thing that every great civilization has had in common, and it's libraries. We got them all over the place in America. Find a book that you're interested in and read it. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be dense. But as long as it's offering something new to you, something that really makes you think about the issues in a different way, or even just educates you on things that you already know, that's the greatest resource that we really have available to us. And of course, if you don't have time to read, there's all kinds of great things. We have YouTube videos. We have podcasts like this one. If I can plug one of my own favorites, we have Advisory Opinions podcast that talks a lot about legal issues of the day. And if that's something you want to do as a primer, then that's great. We have Law 101, which is a book that I had to read in high school to start me off in a legal journey. It really gives you a great basic understanding of early, how American laws developed. And of course, the U.S. Constitution.
Yes, we should all read that. Yes.
Yeah, maybe we should have started with that one. Read the Constitution, read the Declaration, read some of the writings about the Constitution and the Declaration.
And I personally love biographies too. I love biographies of our founding fathers and the women that were with the founding fathers. And I mean, there's just so many people through history that we can emulate, and they lived amazing lives, and we kind of hold ourselves short by our own potential. Eugene?
If I can do one of those, not that I've read anything, but Abigail Adams has amazing letters. Go and read them. And if you want to see a memoir, Clarence Thomas has one, My Grandfather's Son, which is amazing. I encourage everyone to read that one as well.
Great book. Great book. I love that book. Eugene Sr., what else can people do to get educated?
I would say just basically set up. I realize, people, as you become more and more involved in their lives as being an adult, time is sort of the essence. I would say set aside 2 hours a week, preferably at one time. But if not, split them up 1 hour at a time. But ideally, if you could spend 2 hours a week on your day off, or just a time when you have some extended downtime, write out questions or ideas for yourself, whether you do it on your notepad on your phone or you actually write it on paper throughout the week as they come to you, and do the research during that period of time. Get on the internet, do the research. It's going to take you to places, websites that you've never heard of before. A lot of them are going to be good. There's going to be some that's going to have to toss out. Use if you're a Christian, hopefully you are, that you use your belief system, your convictions that you have as a guide to help you determine what is actually truthful and what's not. And then, as he said before you start all that stuff, if you're not done that, read the Constitution, read the Declaration of Independence, familiarize yourself with the founding documents, familiarize yourself with some of the founders themselves. There's a great book. I use it as a reference book by David Barton. It's called Original Intent. And Original Intent has all of those documents in it, but it also has a lot of the historical, like little mini biographies of the people who were the founders early on. It tells you about our Christian heritage, what the things they believe, the things they wrote. And it's a great, it can be used as a primer to help you develop and understand the way American government is set up and why. And then, I would say just become a student of history. History is very, very interesting when you actually study it, and you see that, history goes way back before we were founded. And one of the things I've been promoting with people, especially Christians, but even those are not, because it's kind of my little sneaky way to get into Christianity, is I encourage them to read the book of Genesis, because see, the book of Genesis, 50 chapters, is actually, it's a story. It's a story about the beginning of mankind, but it's also, some parts of it read like a little bit of a soap opera. So, for people who like that kind of mess, it could keep them entertained. But if you read the book of Genesis, and I encourage people to do it preferably with the study Bible, where you have notes and things that you can use to answer questions that you have as you go along. It won't answer all of them, but it will answer most of them. Read the book of Genesis and get an understanding of how things actually began. Now, compare that to the noise you're hearing about evolution and all the other garbage that's being sold to you out there with the so-called conventional wisdom. Compare that and ask yourself, if you've ever bought into those lies, how does that make sense compared to this? It takes a whole lot more faith to believe in evolution than it does in what the book of Genesis is teaching. Frank Turek, who has this program called "It Takes More Faith." I don't have the faith to be an atheist. I think that's the name of this program. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Look, it takes a whole lot more faith to believe in evolution and that we evolved from nothing than it does to believe that God created us and we are who we are because of that. So, and I challenge people. I challenge Christians. I challenge non-Christians, and everybody who's willing to take me up on this. I challenge them constantly. I say, prove me wrong. Go read it and come back to me. We'll have a discussion. And often, what I've done, and I continue to do this because it really is. It makes sense. Do not have conversations with people who are uneducated on the issues you're discussing, to the point where you're giving them credibility. Because I don't allow people who are not Christians to quote scripture. You can try, but it's not going anywhere. If you're not a Christian, you don't have the right to quote scripture to me because you don't even know what it means. But if you are someone who's in the church and you're a Christian and you're studying, you're trying to grow in the Lord, we can work on this. We can talk about these things. But like I said, we have to both be coming from an informed position to have a discussion that's going to actually make any kind of sense. So yeah, if we could have some disagreements, but at least if you know what you're talking about, you know what you disagree with me about. So that's a part of it. And my modes of operation have changed over the years, naturally. But I would say in the last few years, that's what I've been. A big part of my focus is encouraging people to read the book of Genesis, because it's actually pretty discouraging. I wouldn't say discouraging, disheartening to me when I find Christians that don't know the basics. They don't know this. They don't know the 10 Commandments. They don't understand them, and that's what's wiping us out. I mean, how can you come up against evil when you don't even understand the basics of good?
Such a good point. And like any great pastor or preacher, we have gone long on this podcast. So I hope you've been gone along on the journey with us, and we are just so thankful to have Eugene and Eugene Jr. Ralph with us today. So, final question: favorite Cajun food? Quick.
Okay.
I feel like we can probably go 1, 2, 3 on that.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Crawfish.
Crawfish, boiled shrimp, and seafood pasta.
Ooh, seafood pasta sounds great.
And okay. I'm going to give a free plug to this restaurant. It's right over there on the harbor, called Doty's Cajun Restaurant. And I'm telling you, man, if you go there, you'll have a party in your mouth.
Okay, I'll remember that when I go. Awesome. Well, you guys, if you've been encouraged today, if you've been motivated, sign up for our On-Ramp to Political Activism class. It's 3.5 hours of goodness on party politics, advocacy, operating as a Christian with integrity in the political movements, issues from a biblical perspective. We're also about to record and produce our Austin 101 class on the Texas legislature. So we've got tons of resources. Go back and listen or watch all these podcasts. You will learn more from these guests than anywhere else. I mean, I'm telling you, I've learned so much just hosting this. So get educated, listen to amazing people, and it's been so great to have the Ralph family today. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
You're great.